She began to watch Islamic videos on the internet, Muslim convert stories to be specific. These videos allowed her to realize her views on Islam and Muslims. Speaking of poor choices, at the age of 15 she became pregnant. It is also worth mentioning that she was unmarried at the time. Assalamu alaikum. The values and principles of Islam has always seemed to attract especially the women living in the Western world, who are looking to find answers for their spirituality. That is one of the primary reasons why amongst the Muslim converts in the past 2 decades or so, a large percentage was that of women. In this video, we will be shedding some light on the convert story of one such female Muslim convert named Tammy Perkins. Bismillah. To begin with, Tammy Perkins was born in a very small town in New Hampshire, northeast of the USA. Her hometown was very tiny, underdeveloped, and had no diversity at all. It had only one store. Anyway, from a young age of 5 to 6 years, Tammy started going to church, where she used to walk by herself. The people of the church took her under their wing and taught her everything about God and spirituality. It was particularly fortunate for her, since her family was quite poor and oftentimes her mother would send her to church to eat food. And as you might have guessed, at church food was cooked for the poor. Moving on. As Tammy grew up without any significant parental supervision, she found the time of hitting puberty to be particularly tough. Her life didn't have much of any sort of entertainment, so inevitably she ended up making some poor choices. Speaking of poor choices, at the age of 15 she became pregnant. It is also worth mentioning that she was unmarried at the time. By the age of 19 she gave birth to 2 daughters. However, her daughters proved to be a turning point in her life, as she considered them a blessing rather than a curse. Tammy was going down a bad path and she felt like she really needed her daughters. She stepped up and tried to raise her daughters better than she herself was raised. As a single mom, she worked pretty hard, working 2 or 3 jobs at times. Despite so much hard work, she hardly ever had extra money for anything other than the basic necessities of life. It was really tough. Proceeding ahead with the story, the incident of 9/11 led Tammy very conservative politically. She spent most of her time watching Fox News and listening to talk radio. Although she had never met a Muslim in her life, after hearing all the news about 9/11 so-called Muslims who carried out the unfortunate incident, she felt like she knew everything about Islam. Whenever someone would try to defend Islam in front of her, she would become angry and raise her voice. She was just so sure that she knew better than everyone else. Fast forward to 20 years later, both of Tammy's daughters graduated from high school. And soon after that, they found jobs and moved out into their own apartments. Tammy was left all alone in her big, quiet, and empty house. She felt like everything she had worked for as an adult was gone. She struggled to remember her identity before she became a mother. Resultantly, she fell into a pit of depressions. All in all, it was a very dark time for her. Tammy's depressive mental state led her to losing her job, but soon after she decided that it was time to make changes in her life. So accordingly, Tammy sold everything that she had possessed. Her house, her car, you name it. She bought a ticket to Florida to go live with a friend there. She thought that this was a move in her favor. But it turned out to be the complete opposite of that. She had sold all her possessions and spent all her money. Now she was stranded in Florida, with no support system or family. The only good that came from her move to Florida was that she got to learn about computers and internet. That is only when she came across chat rooms. So moving on, Tammy spends quite a lot of time in Christian chat rooms, looking for spiritual guidance. She then stumbled upon a Christian-Muslim chat. The second person she chatted with in this room was a Muslim. And although Tammy was mean and ignorant towards him, he listened to her thoughts with kindness. Upon hearing her difficulties, that person offered her help. Although he didn't know her, he sent her some money so that she can go back to her family. Here's what Tammy had to say about that instance. "I didn't deserve this kindness. I had spewed some mean things about Islam, and here was this person that extended a hand I so desperately needed. Little did Tammy know that this little action from that person would change her life forever. When Tammy got back to New Hampshire, she felt much lighter. It was as if her heart had turned. She began to watch Islamic videos on the internet, muslimconvertstories to be specific. These videos allowed her to realize her views on Islam and Muslims had been wrong all along. A month later, she talked to her Muslim friend from Egypt who had helped her with the money earlier, and he invited her to visit Egypt. Although Tammy was a bit hesitant at first, particularly since there was an ongoing revolution in Egypt at that time, and the image of Middle East was portrayed as utter negativity in the media, she eventually got her passport and set out for Egypt. So upon her arrival in Egypt, Tammy was left awestruck. She had never experienced a place like Egypt before. The next morning after she arrived, she heard the adhan for the first time, and it made tears run down her cheeks. She saw Muslims pray in the streets, in the stores, literally everywhere they were. And this really captivated her. She says, they weren't shy about their love for God. I wanted that. I wanted that in my life. Ultimately, Tammy's interest in Islam grew further. So she began reading and watching as many videos on Islam as she could. Tammy had longed for some sort of structure in her life. With the obligation of 5 daily prayers in Islam, she was getting exactly that. Moreover, she had spent her life drinking alcohol and having relationships with men, and she admits herself these habits didn't bring anything good in her life. So she wanted some rules like no alcohol and no relationships with men before marriage. Islamic principles provided her with those rules as well. So, 1 week after her arrival in Egypt, Tammy said her shahada and became a Muslim. Today, Sister Tammy works with a digital marketer, reflecting on her own journey to Islam. She derives 2 main lessons. The first one is that you should never give up. Hold on to hope and hold on to Allah, and He will do amazing things for you. The second and the equally important one is that of kindness. You should always treat others with kindness, just like an unknown Muslim from Egypt showed kindness to Sister Tammy, and we all know her life turned around after that. Alhamdulillah. May Allah fill our hearts with the love of Islam and the Holy Qur'an.